AATBirds Weekly Report is the Eagle news, notes, and analysis you need.
Quick, he's gonna go. What a give it to Smith, and they stop him again. Go back. He looks, fires for the end zone, intercepted, the 20, the 10, the 5, touchdown, Matt Ware, midfield, he's going to go, Deshaun Jackson. He steps up, he's hit, and falls forward, and he fumbles the football, and the Eagles have it, it's gone, and the Eagles win.
It's all birds, all the time.
And welcome to another edition of the AATBirds Weekly Report. We're going to talk about some Eagles free agency. We have Slay staying, CJ leaving, and everything in between. We're going to talk about the couple signings the Eagles made, a couple of the players leaving. We got to get into the CJ stuff and the Slay stuff, so that's where we'll start off. But as we always have, Kendall joins us at Quebec Eagles, and we have Chip join us too at Chip for the Birds. Going to talk a little Eagles. So how's everyone doing now that Slay's back? Last episode we talked about him potentially leaving because he was leaving, and then he wasn't leaving, and then at the end of the show he stays. So a lot of stuff.
We literally got off the air, and it was after doing like 25 minutes about Slay leaving, go off air, and then it's like, you know what? I'm going to stay. I'm like, well, that was a waste of those 25 minutes. Good job, guys. Good job, us.
Yeah, good to see Slay back. His team's obviously better with him. So don't love the contract, but we'll dive into that then.
Yeah, no, the contract is, unfortunately, it's going to be what it is. Same with the Bradbury, different things down the line that we can worry about. But looking at that, Slay stays. He signs an extension to stay up with the Eagles. And it's a big change because as we saw early in that day and the Eagles not announcing it, we were very okay, what's going on? So they announce it, he stays, he signs an extension, him and Bradbury are back. Now we'll kind of parlay it off of this. Then I believe it was a couple days later I think it was Friday, if I'm not mistaken, Friday or Saturday, CJ Gardner-Johnson signs a 1-year deal with the Detroit Lions, $6.5 million up to $8 million. And apparently there's been a lot of reports. Eagles did offer him a multi-year contract to start. His agency then tweets that it was a backloaded deal and it wasn't up front, which I feel is a little unprofessional on the agency doing that. But Eagles apparently, Jim Trotter did talk about Eagles did not want to match the offer from the Lions. So there's a lot there. I'm going to start with you, Kendall. What is your take on the whole CJ Gardner-Johnson fiasco?
Yeah, I put my tweet out, I guess Monday morning about the whole thing. And, obviously you don't want to see it unfold the way it did. But from CJ's standpoint, I'm not going to sit here and point fingers, but a lot of it goes on him and his agency. I feel like the Eagles have made it known that he was a priority going into the offseason. And for them to even offer, assuming they've made offers before the tag window, and for him to want to bank on himself to get paid more, clearly he was kind of unaware of what his market was. And so pretty much it got bounced back on the Eagles being like, oh, they didn't want to pay him or they didn't want to match the offer. It's like, no, they gave him the opportunity to come back. They offered him what they thought was reasonable, which was, and then he came back and they said, no, we're going to move on. So, obviously this team's better with him and you want to have him back, but, the off-field stuff was weird and, great player, but I'm glad that's moved on.
Chip?
Yeah, look, the whole thing felt weird. I agree. CJ, he looked at the market. He bet on himself. He wants to be an Eagle. He wants to be an Eagle. He said all the right things, and then for it to go the way that it did is a little upsetting. I'm not crazy about all the social media stuff that's happening on all sides. I mean, the agency shouldn't release stuff. The Eagles beat reporter shouldn't release stuff. The fans need to chill out. Like this is a business. Like he took a 1-year flyer on himself. You know what I mean? So the market wasn't where he wanted. It's 1 year, and he's going to a Detroit team that has gotten drastically better. So. My frustration tends to lean more toward the entire thing. We knew that the team had to get younger. We knew the team had to look different. But the mass exodus of defensive players specifically is a little concerning. And now, you looked at the guys that were out there. Johnny, I know you were kind of big on bringing in Jalen Mills. He's back with the Patriots. We do not at this point have a solution at the safety position, which is a vital, vital role. I think they're trying to clean up the linebacker position a little bit. That we basically traded with the Bears when all is said and done, a linebacker for a linebacker. But the CJ Gardner-Johnson, you're going to feel it, and they have to replace it. Like, you cannot go into the season with Reed Blankenship and that's it. You're not moving Avonte Maddox to safety. Kayvon Wallace has proven that he can't do it unless it's a special teams or a replacement role. So you need to improve that position drastically. And you were hoping it was with CJ Gardner-Johnson. You're starting to see some of the top guys come off the board. So Howie's going to have to make a move at that position specifically.
And, we'll get into it. There is a graphic that we'll have a little bit later talking about kind of what's left on the market, some of the names, and we can always dive into the names that are not on the list. But when you look at the position, you look at the safety position and CJ Gardner-Johnson, yes, he was a very talented player in this defense. He had a really good season last year and, thought that he was worth a little bit more. But again, I know when he was in New Orleans, he played a lot of the nickel position, didn't play too much of safety. This was the year he played mostly safety for the Eagles. But the way that I look at it is, unfortunately, with all the antics and everything, may have went towards the bad side in terms of hurting him, because all the tweets, deleted tweets, all the kind of throwing some people under the bus, and then he signs with Detroit, and then he starts posting Hurts donut, and then deletes that, and then starts. And I'm not going to say that they didn't want to sign him to a long-term deal because they didn't trust him. I know there are some people putting that out. I don't think that is somewhat the case, because I think the Eagles have the leadership in the locker room to be able to handle that. My feeling, with it is, you look at a player of his caliber, if he's a star, the Saints never get rid of him. And then when he's a free agent, the player, the coach that drafted him is Sean Payton in Denver. They don't sign him. You have Dennis Allen with New Orleans. They don't, try to get him back. There's certain different players. Vic Fangio was here for a very short time with Miami. They don't take a look at him. There's a lot of stuff, unfortunately. And then the Eagles offer him one. And the thing with it is the Eagles offered him. Then he said no. It wasn't like the Eagles could just wait around for him to make his decision, because
Agreed.
If you do that, James Bradberry possibly signs somewhere else. Darius Slay may stay and still get a deal, but then you're down a corner, and you may sign Greedy Williams to come in and take that role and stuff like that.
And that's what happened with CJ. Like, he wanted to go out and test the market, but they're like, hey, like, we don't want to wait for you to make a decision. We have to act and we have to move. And they chose to move on and get Bradberry extended. And, they brought him back, and sure, CJ didn't like that, but it's like, listen, if you want to test your market, this is the consequences. And so they got James taken care of. They brought back Slay, and so he was upset about not getting his money, but it's like, you tested the market, and so what's going to happen. And so, yeah.
So, and I want to put it this way too: when you look at the position of safety and you look at this defense, I feel like being able to plug in, whether it's a veteran and a rookie, into the back end of that secondary is maybe a little bit easier than trying to find another corner to be able to, take on the role that Bradberry had last year if he doesn't come back. Certain things like that. I feel like the safety position, whether they get a veteran and then they draft somebody, or they get 2 veterans and draft somebody and have, the depth back there. Maybe Reed Blankenship takes another step like Marcus Epps did and stuff like that.
I think he will.
But for me, I just feel like that position, for them, I feel like we know how they value their position. We know how they value the position. We know how they value the linebacker position. We've been fans how long? We've seen it. We've seen the revolving door in terms of the players coming in and out, whether they come from the draft, undrafted free agents, late round picks, Canadian Football League. We've seen it all. So for me, looking at the situation, unfortunately, it sucks. I wish he was, still with the Eagles because he had a hell of a season. But and I don't want people to get into looking at the other players that they brought back. The Fletcher Cox for up to 10 million. It's not 10 million. It's
Right.
up. He's got to, meet the incentive. So that's even less than what he made last year. And of course, you get rid of, Hargrave leaves, goes to San Francisco. You still need a veteran on the defensive line next to Jordan Davis and be able to have that depth at the position to get a player like that who's been with the franchise, a leader in terms of on the defensive side of the ball. Brandon Graham, another guy who had 11 sacks coming off of, Achilles injury.
Like
Having him on your defensive
highest
side of the
paid
ball.
edge.
So for me, it's unfortunately, I get it. I get where the money kind of dried up a little bit for the Eagles, but I feel like they think that they can fit this position of safety and they can figure it out, pretty easy with, putting a couple veterans and also possibly drafting, because the safety position in the draft, you can get in the second, third round, some pretty talented players. So I feel like that's something definitely for them as well.
Yeah, I mean, and I look, when all is said and done, I mean, we knew that this team was going to look different. That's not surprising.
Yeah.
But at this point, that the team is not ready yet. And I look at the strides the rest of just the NFC has made. The NFC has made moves. So I'm not saying that the Eagles are now, not Super Bowl caliber or anything like that. But again, I've said this for years. I judge an offseason based on the season ended. Right now, this Eagles team is not. This Eagles team has gotten worse. And that's concerning. Now, coming off the Super Bowl, it's expected, but it's concerning.
But Chip, I also look at it this way too, though. When you look at the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs, they lost their left tackle in Orlando Brown, their right tackle in Andrew Wiley. They lost Frank Clark, they released. Juju Smith-Schuster, Mecole Hardman. They lost some players. Yes, they did sign a few players and got Jawan Taylor. They got Drew Tranquill, and they got Mike Edwards. They also lost Juan Thornhill. So teams will lose players.
Agreed.
That we have to, yes, right now, they may not be as strong as they were. But when I look at the one key cog on this team that I look at and say, okay, I'm totally fine. When you look at Jalen Hurts and this Eagles offense.
Sure. Agreed. And Jalen Hurts he's going to get paid. Like, there's no question about it. He's going to be here for a long time. And the continuity of having him with Nick Sirianni, quarterback coach coming to offensive coordinator, like, that's not that big of a deal. The defense is what concerns me because it's a new defensive coordinator. It's going to be a new system and a bunch of new players that aren't as good as the ones that left. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, ultimately, like, the Eagles still, like, the NFC goes to the Eagles. So, everyone's trying to, just essentially catch up to what the Eagles were or are. And I don't think the Eagles have regressed to the point where, like, there's anyone that's better than them. I mean, the Dallas Cowboys have obviously made moves. Cooks is a good, great receiver for number 2. Gilmore is a great number 2 for a corner. But ultimately, no one has ever caught up to the Eagles to be better than them or where I think, the Eagles aren't the favorites. I think the Eagles are still the clear favorites to come out of the NFC. Niners obviously got Hargrave. They've improved defensively. But ultimately, who's their quarterback? Trey Lance is, off a broken ankle. Purdy has an elbow injury. They have no quarterback moving forward, In the Cowboys, again, division rival. We'll see how that unfolds. But, until there's, like, a definite move that's like, oh my gosh, like, this is like the Eagles should be worried. I'm not concerned because on paper, and especially from the way this Super Bowl was, like no one is on the Eagles level, and it's going to take a lot for me to feel differently, at least in my opinion. And also, the offseason is still so early. And I said
I
in my
know this
tweet
is
on
torture.
Monday, I said in my tweet on Monday, like how, you know, how we making moves later on in like August or September isn't, reliable and shouldn't be, as consistent as he's done in the past years. But we know how he likes to make moves later on in the offseason. And so, obviously moves need to be made and they're going to happen. I mean, for God's sake, we can still get Bayard or we can get, safeties can get, whether it's trade or whatever it may be the draft. Like this roster is so far from complete and it's not going to look anything like what it is now. And let's say a month, 2 months, you know what I mean?
And you look at the offseason, and that's what's crazy. That's why they always say the NFL is basically all year round because after the
Right.
season, you have you have the playoffs going up all the way up until February, and then by the time March hits, then you have free agency starting, and free agency goes all the way. But you have free agency, and then in April you start talking more of the draft, and then you have the draft start popping up, and then the end of April you have the draft, and you have some mini camps, and then all of a sudden. Well, for the Eagles and some other teams, you're going to have the jersey releases. You're going to have the schedule release. You're going to have all this stuff that's just jam-packed. And then you think it's June back into OTAs and mini camps. And then all of a sudden it's into July and there's training camp and preseason and the season. So, it's a process. It's a big time process. But when you look at the way this team is being built and you look at the moves since we were last on, Eagles have made a couple moves. So they signed cornerback Greedy Williams to a 1-year deal, 26-year-old long athletic corner. I think that's a really solid deal to get a young guy on the outside to be basically that cornerback 3, just in case there was possibly an injury to a Bradbury or a Slay, because they did not have that last year. And luckily those two guys stayed healthy all year.
Right.
They don't have to rely on Zach McPherson right now, at least. You have backup quarterback Marcus Mariota signing a 1-year deal.
Yeah.
We will come back to that.
Let's pause there for a second because holy cow.
Yeah, it's 8 years in the making, right?
So I was at the draft party at the link when Mariota was going to be the next quarterback of the Eagles. And I was, vehemently saying, no, because what we would have had to have traded up to get him would have crippled this franchise. And again, you look at the trade package that got, leaked out, Fletcher Cox and all the first round draft picks. Like it's Mariota went to places where he needed to be and had some level of success, but never has really proven to be what the hype was about him coming out.
Not true.
You think that he's better? He is.
I'm not
he
saying.
Came out?
I'm not saying that the Eagles clearly they would not have been as good as they were, as they or I guess are. But we don't know. Mariota could have been like a phenomenal quarterback, being back with Chip Kelly and in his system. Like that was his bread and butter. So it's like he had to learn a completely different offense out in Tennessee. It's adapting to a new new scheme and whatnot. If he was. That's why Chip Kelly wanted him so badly because like he knew his traits. He knew what he was as a quarterback. He knew his strengths. So I'm not saying that they were going to be good and like going to make a Super Bowl, but
it was Chip Kelly's system. It was Chip Kelly's system itself that was the reason. It was dominant for the first couple of weeks, but that is a system that does not translate to a full, at that time, 16-game NFL season because you have aging players. I mean, by the end of the season, those players were gassed, and Chip Kelly made absolutely no adjustments. So I think it would have been the same exact thing. You saw it with, the Philadelphia Ducks that came to be where, they all were part of the systems. It just didn't come to be. But I think getting him now as a backup. See, my issue with Gardner Minshew was always the way that the two of them played.
They weren't.
They were so totally different. Marcus Mariota has always been good coming off of the play action and the read option. Therefore, you can install one offense, and that is your offense, whoever the quarterback may be.
And I want to kind of back it up. I do want to kind of touch on what you're talking about in terms of, the whole Chip Kelly. We don't know how it would have been, but you look at the dismantling of what he was doing as the quote unquote
Tough scene.
GM of trading LaShawn McCoy for Kiko Alonso,
Ugh.
releasing Deshaun Jackson. Jeremy Maclin signs with the Kansas City Chiefs the year prior, or the year before. I think it's prior. That's whatever. I don't want to keep getting into it. You're the teacher, Chip, so you can correct me. But you look at the dismantling of the team, signing DeMarco Murray, signing Ryan Matthews, signing Byron Maxwell, all this stuff that they did. Yeah, maybe it could have been, they could have been okay. Maybe he wouldn't have gotten fired in 2015. Maybe he got fired in 2016. I don't know. But you look at it almost as a blessing in disguise. And I think maybe this offseason we have some type of episode called the Howie Roseman Gymnastics, going over the couple of seasons in terms of how he reshaped rosters. Because how he got out of those to then turn it into the number 2 pick. It's funny this way because it kind of brings it all around. When you look at that 2016, he gets rid of this crap that Chip Kelly wanted on this team, getting rid of Maxwell and Alonso and DeMarco Murray and getting all that stuff, being able to move up to number 2
and got value out of it too.
For the quarterback that Chip Kelly couldn't do himself and move up to number 2, Eagles were able to do it. So it's kind of a slap in the face there. Then 8 years later, signing Marcus Mariota to play for the Eagles as the backup, but get him finally in Philly. It's just like another slap in the face to try to, and then I feel like Howie's like, okay. And again, he does fit what the Eagles do and what they run as an offense. If he were to happen to come in, it's not going to be, he had over 400 rushing yards, I believe, last year. He didn't play as well. He's playing with the bad Atlanta team, but again, he's a player that can step right in and you don't have to fully change absolutely everything that you do as an offense.
Yeah, and last thing about Chip Kelly, before we move on, he was a phenomenal drafter. And if you would have put Howie Roseman's ability to wheel and deal and negotiate and whatnot, you pair that with Chip Kelly's drafting, we're talking about generational talent, of a general manager. And it makes you think about what the team would look like if Howie was a GM for all those years, how different this team would look. And, would there have been a Super Bowl sooner? We don't know, but
too bad they were oil and water and didn't mix, unfortunately.
Right.
But looking at the other 2 signings that the Eagles did make, the last, actually it was both of them yesterday, one earlier and one a little later. They signed safety Justin Evans from the New Orleans Saints. He played 33% of the snaps last year with the Saints. He had his press conference today. He did talk about playing a little bit of nickel and a little bit of safety. He did miss a handful of seasons with some injuries he was getting over as well. So he is still young. He is 27. He's also the guy, I don't know if you guys saw it or remember, back when UCLA played Texas A&M, I think it was possibly 2015, when Josh Rosen was on UCLA. Justin Evans was the player who popped his knee back into place.
For real?
I don't know if you've ever seen that video.
I know exactly what you're talking about
on Twitter, but he was the guy that popped his knee back into place.
That's crazy.
But again, he's fought through a lot of adversity, a lot of injuries, a lot of rehab he's had to do. I think this is more of a depth piece, having a guy to be able to step in and do a number of things, a special teams player as well. And then they also signed a linebacker from the Chicago Bears, Nicholas Morrow, who played with the Raiders prior, to kind of fill in a role as another, depth piece, but possibly can start. He started 99.8% of the Bears snap last year. So he was on the field basically every single defensive snap. So, what that is, I don't know.
Which is what we need. You know what I mean? That's what we need. We've had success with Kaiser White being on the field every single snap. We had success with TJ Edwards being on the field that's when we have our best success.
But the other thing of it, and I was talking to Kendall about it too, and a couple other people, is when you look at these signings, and the Eagles need to be doing, losing all these free agents is one thing. But when you look at signing these veteran free agents, guys who've been on the field, the Eagles aren't going to stay as healthy as they were last year.
No shit.
They're going to have injuries, and you want to be able to have players that can fit right into the spot, be able to go right into a position and not have to worry about an undrafted free agent, a guy you have to sign off the street, a player who's really not a starter or not really an every down type of player, who's really more of a special teams player, having to go play meaningful snaps. They need those players, those depth players, whether that is also signing a couple more 1-year deal veteran stopgap type of players and also drafting some players too. But I feel Eagles may have gotten a little bit lucky last year with the injury, not having TJ Edwards or Kaiser White really hurt, or, their corners. Yeah, Vontae got hurt, and CJ got hurt. But again, I don't think they want to get into that situation where they have 2, 3, 4 guys in the secondary possibly missing a game or two and having to rely on, what we saw back in 2020 and 2019 and 2018 in terms of the secondary of signing these guys off the streets, stuff like that. So I think these signings are very good in terms of depth. And it was very key when you look at the signing of Justin Evans and you see all the media, and Kendall, you even messaged me about it, talking about they all worded it the same way. This is just a depth signing, because it was right after CJ got signed earlier in the day. It was a depth signing, and that's what kind of, all of them reiterated. And because they need depth. They need depth at the positions because they lost so many free agents, and you want to be able, if you're a contender, you want to be able to have that depth, because it is absolutely key when you're trying to, get to that next level again and winning the Super Bowl. Yes, getting there is great, but this time winning the Super Bowl, you want to be able to have that depth, because the injury bug will hit you. Unfortunately, you don't want it to, but it is something that will hit you.
Yeah, and they knew that too. I mean, last year for Bradbury and Slay, like that was our biggest concern going into the season, was what happens when one of these guys get hurt. Zach McPherson, obviously, young and talented, but what does he really provide that for sure, that he can bring? And luckily, they went all year without getting hurt magically. But now they knew that that's not going to happen again this year. It's just like, it's not. I mean, they bring Greedy because they know that they need to bring depth. And, Chris Evans, you bring him in too. It's big for that. It's big for depth wise, but it's also, these guys have experience too. So you're going to have fresh legs, both Greedy's 26, 27?
Greedy's 26 and
he's young.
Evans is 27, and I think
and again,
more
young, have potential, and obviously they're not done. I do think it was very interesting how literally every single Eagles beat writer was like pretty much putting emphasis on the Eagles, aka pretty much aren't done, and they'll be doing something else. And I think that's going to be trading for someone who I don't know, but we've seen how he gets aggressive. With guys on 1-year deals left in their remaining contracts. Antoine Winfield, I've seen on Twitter. Obviously, Kevin Byard, if he's available, release or trade option. We'll see what happens, but it's good to have depth, because last year to have all 22 starters in the Super Bowl, that's just like I don't know if it's ever happened before. It hasn't, and so they're going to lose guys this season, whether it's season-ending injuries or banged up whatnot, but it's going to happen. So,
and also remember they do. And I want to touch on one thing in terms of the 2021 Bears and the defensive coordinator Sean Desai. That was his team. I want to go over one thing with that. It kind of relates to what you're talking about too. But also remember, some people may not want to think about it, but Derek Barnett is also coming out back from an injury. So that is depth there too, having another defensive end, because he is good against the run. Yes, he hasn't lived up to the potential that we thought as a first round pick.
And I wonder if Barnett would have had a better year this year with having those limited snaps. Like we saw Brendan Graham have a huge regression in his snaps and how much of impact he had. I wonder if Barnett would have positively impacted from those those fewer snaps, but he also maybe more of an impact. So hopefully we get to see that next year.
Yeah, and he's a player that is very good against the run too, which I know you'd want an edge rusher to be more of a pass rusher, but again, the run defense was a big issue for them, especially in the Super Bowl, unfortunately. But all year they had some struggles, but something like that also helps them. But bringing up the Chicago Bears from 2021, which Sean Desai was the defensive coordinator of, and looking at the snap counts on their defense. So they had Eddie Jackson was a safety. Tashawn Gibson. Those were the two starting safeties. I know there were some injuries too. A couple guys missed a game or two and stuff like that. But Eddie Jackson played 74% of the snaps, and Gibson played 62% of the snaps. DeAndre Houston Carson, who is a free agent, played 39.6% of the snaps. Deion Bush, another safety who is also a free agent, 35% of the snaps. So it looks like they do use some safeties when you look at that. They do use the safety a lot. So and that's where you look at what they were, and I want to bring up, that's where you look at the Justin Evans signing, and they say they're not done at safety. It's a depth signing. They're not done at safety. Because right now at safety, you have Reed Blankenship, Justin Evans, Kayvon Wallace, Andre Chachere, and Marquise Blair. A lot of not much. I would say
that was my point, is that it is not much. They have to make another move here.
And I think the Evans is almost him and Wallace basically battling, because I think
they're the same player.
Yeah,
I'd be surprised
a little bit better, but
I'd be surprised if Wallace makes it past
I would be too.
Preseason game. I mean, I think they are very satisfied with him as a special teamer, but I think they know that Evans can bring more than just a special teamer. So, I mean, I think Wallace is a phenomenal tackler. I think he had some flashes this year and even some signs of growth. But I know a lot of Eagles beat writers were very surprised that he even made it past training camp of last year. So, see how that unfolds.
For me, it's just you have two guys there at safety that can contribute. You need at least two more. That's just basically
this defense is incomplete right now. And
no
like you said, Barnett's coming back. That's great. Fletcher Cox, aging but is coming back. Brandon Graham, aging but is coming back. Nakobe Dean's going to take a step. Jordan Davis is going to take a step. Now you've locked up Slay and Bradbury for a while. So the pieces are definitely there. But now it's all about the development and this, can our new defensive coordinator get the most out of these players?
And that's where it brings up here what is left on the market.
Yes. Did you update this from?
I did update it.
Okay.
Yes. A couple guys got taken off because they've gotten signed. So I did update on basically who is there. So I'll read down the list, and then if there's some names on there that you guys don't see that you want to pop in there, especially with John Desai connections in terms of who he coached before, you can certainly do that. But we have, of course, linebacker Bobby Wagner, who's basically number one guy that's out there. Wide receiver Jarvis Landry, wide receiver Alamade. I'll just say Zacchaeus. We'll say Zacchaeus. Defensive lineman Calais Campbell, defensive tackle Quentin Jefferson, Adrian Amos, linebacker Zach Cunningham, edge rushers Leonard Floyd and Yannick Ngakoue, safeties John Johnson III and Taylor Rapp, and defensive tackle Puna Ford. There's a lot of talent still left out there. Again, some of these guys are probably waiting until the draft to see kind of how it shakes out, where teams don't get players they need, and then it kind of helps them. Sometimes it doesn't work in their favor because you wait till the draft, then you really have absolutely no leverage at all. So it all depends on the type of player you are. That's why you'll see a lot more signings before the draft, so team players can get signed, get on rosters, because they can get a little bit more money than they would after the draft. But looking at this list, does anybody, suit your fancy?
Obviously Bobby Wagner, would love to have him on his defense. I just don't think they'll be in the Eagles' budget to bring him in. Jarvis Landry, he would be a pretty solid number 3 for this offense. He's a very good possession guy. I'm not sure he has too much left in his tank, but I mean, I'd be satisfied with it. Two guys that come to my mind is, I don't know if Carlos Dunlap has retired yet, but I would love to see Dunlap in this defense, because I think Desai would like to use him all over defensive line, whether it's defensive tackle on the edge. I think he would, get creative with him.
Again, that's another Chief that's a free agent.
Yeah.
That plays about 60% of the snaps for them.
And then I'd also like to see, I've been big on this guy since his days as a rookie on the Buccaneers. I would love to see Quan Alexander. He's bounced around the league a little bit, but, he has plenty of experience. He's once been considered like an elite linebacker, but there's a reason why he's bounced around. But if you can sign him to a 1-year deal and he'll give you, whatever you need for a year just to fill in that gap, by all means, please bring him in. So, we'll see what unfolds, but I'd love to see Carlos Dunlap and also Adrian Amos. I'd also like to see. I would imagine he probably would sign after the draft just because, aging veteran, probably not going to sign until, a team needs him. So,
Yeah, if team needs him, absolutely needs him, then it kind of drives the price. Chip, anybody on that list that's either on that list or someone who's not on the list? Because I know there's somebody I didn't put on the list that you did mention earlier who is still a free agent. Jadeveon Clowney.
I was literally just about to say that. And only because, look, you're looking at a guy like Jadeveon Clowney who is still playing at a pretty damn good clip. Now he's not obviously at his, his rookie numbers and his early career numbers, but I think, as that linebacker / edge rusher position, I think that he could be very successful there. I love Ngakoue. I've loved him. I think he's been phenomenal for.
I think Ngakoue fits exactly. He's like basically him and Hassan are like the same size. They both have that quick twitch, always after the quarterback. I've loved since 2020 when there was all those rumors with trying to get
he was going to come here.
Yeah. So
I think that if we're looking for that additional wide receiver. Look, Jarvis Landry is he was old 2 years ago, and I know he's still putting up numbers here and there. But we're talking about a position where we already have 2 studs. So we really are looking for that third guy, that prove-it guy. And maybe he's already on the roster, but I think that, we saw some things in our third string receiver that Zach Pascal was starting over him. So I would take a flyer on a guy like DJ Chark, who's still available.
Marvin Jones.
I'm not taking it on like one of these big, like Odell Beckham Jr. is still available. I don't want Odell Beckham Jr.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't want these guys that are coming off these horrific injuries.
Why you don't want Julio Jones?
I don't need a big name guy. We already have our 2 big name guys. Let them develop. Use that third spot as somebody that can pull that safety coverage, that can create mismatches, but that isn't going to demand, 200, 300 catches a year. Like, it's not reasonable. And then they're going to throw a tantrum. Matt Ioannidis is still available. Again, if you're looking for just like straight up line play, that's available. There's still some names out there, but for me, it would be Jadeveon Clowney, Ngakoue, or DJ Chark. I think those guys would all make the team instantly better at each of their positions.
Yeah, no, you look at that, looking at some of the receivers out there, Jamison Crowder, you have Byron Pringle. There's some guys out there, some veterans. Maybe you bring a veteran on a minimum deal that has to compete, potentially I could see maybe they do something along the lines of that. But when you look at the list, and I like Zacchaeus from Atlanta, I feel he would be a good number 3. I don't think he's going to cost you that much money. He is still young. I think he's 26. Again, he's, a young player there. I love Calais Campbell. I know he's older, 36 years old. But you look at the veteran
Is he considered a defensive tackle? I always thought he was a DT, but when I saw that he got released, he was considered an edge.
He's an end in a 3-4. So basically he would play,
right. Okay.
Almost, I guess you say Fletcher Cox's role or whatever you want to say that, but he can play either or. He's 6'7", almost 6'8", 300 and something pounds. So, and he still has some, some oomph to him. So on a 1-year deal, like kind of how they did Sue and Linval Joseph, getting a veteran like him who's been around the block, who's been on a lot of winning teams, I would like that.
Yeah, I think at this point, with the exception of I'm looking at this list again, like maybe like Ngakoue, maybe a John Johnson, just because you have to lock up somebody. I think a lot of these guys that you would add are on prove-it deals. 1-year prove-it deals. I don't think you're locking up a Bobby Wagner for 3 seasons. I don't think you're locking up a Calais Campbell for 3 seasons. You're bringing them in, right around camp time. because that's what they've commanded.
And
I think that what's his name? Harris is going to be back. You know what I mean? Just because he's going to be available still.
He's long gone.
Yeah, and
now that Gannon isn't here.
The other thing you have to look at too is you talked about prove it deals, and guys, I wouldn't be surprised if they look in terms of the XFL and bringing guys on minimum deals to compete, and maybe somebody sparks something and a receiver, gives you find a fourth receiver, you find a player who can play on the defensive line, you find someone who's still young, 26, 27 years old, that has a little bit, little more tread on the tires, along the lines of that. So there's a lot of different avenues this team can go. And I think also what helps when you look at some of these veterans, and you look at some of these guys, the Eagles were in the Super Bowl last year. They have Jalen Hurts. They have a potent offense. They have some key veterans. They have some openings too. When you look at some of these veterans, maybe not taking as much money, a John Johnson, or, you look at some of these guys and thinking, hey, I want to go play for a winner. I want a chance to win a Super Bowl, and maybe taking a little bit less to play for the Eagles, and, turning down some of the other teams that potentially offered them a little more, but knowing they're kind of a couple years away. You could see possibly something with that too. But and for me, looking at Howie Roseman, he's always got something up his sleeve. So depending on what they do, whether it's in the draft night, we've seen that. We've seen it closer to the season. There's different things. There's different players. I saw players from like Kendall said, Antoine Winfield Jr. I saw someone say Jeremy Chin. There's some different players out there
I would like a Jeremy Chin. I would like Jeremy Chin. I think, again, once the issue is you're talking about a 1-year prove it deal. Like, I think at this point, if you've reached this point of free agency and you're not one of those first guys off the board, you really are looking at prove it deals.
Well, Antoine Winfield and Jeremy Chin you have to trade for. They're on the last year of their rookie deal. So that's a guy that you could potentially franchise, and you want to keep them or extend them. And they're both young. They're both 25 years old. So
people forget that Jeremy Chin was going to be an Eagle when he was first drafted.
They picked
because
Hurts.
Jim Schwartz was huge on him, like huge. Like he insisted to Howie to draft him, and then Howie's like, "No, we have other ideas. We're going to draft Jalen Hurts."
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't think Jeremy Chin's going to be available. I think beginning of the offseason, I would say yeah, but I think they have something brewing down there. They have a window with the NFC South being so weak. I think they want to get that defense complete the way it is, keep that how it was last year. Give Stroud an offense, or Bryce Young, whoever it is, the offense that they want, and they're going to try to win that division this year. So, as much as I would love to see Jeremy Chin available, I don't think he'll go anywhere.
Right.
Yeah, and like I said, there's plenty of names out there. There's still going to be players who are going to be released. There's going to be so many different things that will happen. But I thought this was fun, just to kind of see who's left on the market after the first week of free agency. We're going to start kind of getting into a little bit of some draft talk. We have some Eagles gabbed some visits with some prospects. Maybe we'll kind of touch on the Bijan Robinson, what the Eagles should do at 10, certain things along the lines of that we can start getting into, because the draft is about a month away. So a lot of stuff. And of course, we'll still update news that happens. If the Eagles make any trades or any signings, we'll definitely be in touch with that as well. But hey, it was a fun episode, talking a little Eagles, talking some additions they made. They were a little bit busy, so that's always fun when they are, because it kind of gives us content and to be able to talk about. Of course, we're here every Wednesday night, the weekly report. Just make sure you're tuning into everything at AATBirds on Instagram, on Twitter, at AATSports_ on Twitter and Facebook. Make sure you're liking, subscribing. If you have any type of suggestions, anything you want us to talk about, anything you want us to bring up, definitely hit the DMs. So we do see those. We'll be able to respond to those. But, with that, it was a fun episode, and we'll be back again. Thank you, Kendall.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you, Chip. And we always end it with a very happy and a very joyful Go Birds.
Go Birds.
This is Matt Ware. Hey, for all the Eagle content you need, go follow All About the Birds. They do a damn thing. Check them out.
Hey, Eagles fans, I may be in Tampa, but I know where to find the best Eagles content out there. Check out my friends at All About the Birds.
Philadelphia, what's up? This your boy Freddie Mitchell, a.k.a. Fred X. It's all about the bird.
All birds all the time. All birds all the time.
All About the Birds provides you with weekly analysis, game recaps, informative interviews, and it's all birds all the time.